someone's wedding somewhere. My older brother said, oh wait, then you have second marriages in your early to mid forties. So there will be a new,
Yeah, but the presents still have to be as good.
yeah. Yeah, but that stinks because we have more money now than we did in our twenties. When we had to go to all the bachelor and bachelorette parties.
So if you get registered, what's that gonna be?
Been to a wedding yet.
Interested to see if they're registered.
Are you all ready? All right, everyone, we're going to get started. Welcome to the June 27th, 2024 BAR small meeting. My name is Lindsay Van Slimbrook. I'll be your chairwoman this evening. Fellow board members present tonight are Laura Altman, Julia Martin, Bill Lee, and Fillmore Wilson. The order of today's meeting will be as follows. For each application, city staff will give an introduction of the project for the benefit of the staff, for the benefit of the board and the public. This will be followed by the applicant's presentation. The applicant will have a 10-minute period of time to present, and anyone speaking on behalf of the applicant, this will be owners, designers, consultants, please speak during this period versus during public comment, and please speak from the microphone. By ordinance, the board can ask questions of the applicant at any time. By custom, we do so on the heels of the applicant's presentation. This will be followed by public comment. If you're speaking as a member of the public, I'll recognize you, and please approach the podium and state your name first and last for the record. And if you're a neighbor, please state your address as well. Following public comment, we'll hear city staff comments and recommendations. And once we've heard from city staff, the applicant will have a 5-minute period of time to respond to or clarify anything raised in the public comment or the city staff comments and recommendations. Once the applicant response period is concluded, the applicant's presentation and public comment will be closed, and we'll move into board discussion and a vote on each application. Results will be posted online at the city's website. No items have been withdrawn or deferred this evening. Please make sure your cell phones are off, and please limit your comments to architecture only, which is the purview of this board. We do not have any authority over zoning, livability, lot lines, stormwater, anything like that. So those concerns should not be voiced before this board. Okay, agenda item A1 is review of the minutes from the June 13th, 2024 meeting. I make a motion for approval with the few comments that I circulated to the board earlier. Do I have a second?
I'll second them.
Thank you, Julia. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Agenda item B1 is 1.5 Addison Street. Frankie, if you'll give us an introduction and overview of the project, please.
Yes, ma'am. 1.5 Addison Street is in East Central, which is Council District 4. It is not surveyed circa the date we pulled from the tax records was 1920, but I believe the applicant did establish it was older than that. It is in the historic materials demolition purview. They're requesting complete demolition of the existing structure. This is the property's location on Addison. Some existing site photos. And some context of Addison. And then we have the sandboard map showing the history of the property. And I will turn it over to the applicant.
Thank you, Frankie. John Sullivan, SR Studio, representing the owner. I guess we all met out there this morning. I think this is a tough one. I don't like taking down buildings, but there's not much left there. There was, as in the application said, it was actually previously in 2011 got a full demo permit for the building, and there was a 1-story addition on 2 sides that pretty much fell down. It's been taken down since then. So the siding on those 2 sides are gone. The porch is gone. There's no historic roof. Our windows, the roof is shingles. It's also hampered that there's a grand tree just a couple of feet off the property to the right side. So this is, I don't know, to save it, there's really not much for saving. There's no foundation. I think you can see there's stones and just seam blocks sitting on the ground that's holding this thing up. Could it be renovated? Yes, but I don't think there'll be anything left of the original outside a few pieces of siding. I think this is one of those ones that BAR needs to get more than just demo in this area, because I think the former would be great for the block, but you guys don't have control over that after the demo. I know that, but I guess on one side too, because of the tree right above this, we couldn't do a 2-story right on the block anyway. I think ideally it would we had 1 story up front shifted over from that tree to give it a little room to breathe, because that tree, I think not only now, in the future will do a lot of damage to this whatever it is down there, but I guess that's all.
Thank you. Any questions? All right, thank you. Do we have anyone speaking from the public?
So my name is Kevin Everly. I live up in the uptown and take a particular concern over demolitions in the uptown, which is why I'm here. I'm totally opposed to the demolition of the building. I was there this morning. I would agree with part of what John had to say, which is that I wish the BAR had control over what comes after, but where we differ is that I am totally in opposition to the demolition of what is there now. 3 years ago, the board, almost 3 years ago to the day, the board turned down the demolition of a far worse building over on Shepherd Street, which I personally know about because after the board unanimously opposed the demolition of that, I purchased that house and have just wrapped up the restoration of it. And while like this, it had its problems, lack of windows. It also actually had far less siding than this one does. And it turned out great. I'll pat myself on the back and say. So this one really does not need to be demolished. It's, at least the form is certainly still there. And as Frankie said, it actually is older than 1920. I know John is not the one to say 1920, but it was actually built sometime between 1891 and 1893 for Peter Gors, who is a German grocer and immigrant who purchased several of the lots that used to be Addison Farm when they were all subdivided and auctioned off, and he built several similar homes to this one. I think this may be the last remaining of his contribution. And so it would be a shame to see this go. It's sort of an interesting kind of leafy street, and with a little effort, and by little, I mean a lot of effort, it could be returned to something contributing to this street. So I'm totally opposed.
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation. HCF has reviewed the application for demolition of the historic structure at 1.5 Addison Street, and we appreciate the site visit this morning. We agree with Mr. Everly. Unfortunately, the building is in very poor condition and will require extensive work to rehabilitate. This block is characterized by small cottages of similar scale. 1.5 Addison Street contributes to the character of the block. The historic form of the structure is important to retain, as well as any other historic element that can be salvaged. We think this is an important building to retain, and we respectfully recommend denial of this application and encourage the applicant to rehabilitate the structure. Thanks.
And Catherine Alexander, Preservation Society of Charleston, and we have similar comments. We appreciated the chance to visit the site this morning. This 1-story Freedman's Cottage is an important early survivor that speaks to the developmental history of this street. It was severed by the construction of I-26 in the mid-20th century, but as Mr. Everly pointed out, this property predates the date that's advertised on the agenda, and on the 1902 Sanborn map, 1.5 Addison and its sister house are the first and only 2 buildings that appear on the north side of Addison Street. So that's pretty significant. While the level of deterioration is unfortunate, the building's historic form is intact and contributes to the streetscape as well as Charleston's vernacular architectural landscape at large. Like 5 Shepherd Street, which Mr. Everly mentioned, through the Preservation Society's Carolopolis Award program, we get the chance to celebrate rehabilitation of Freedman's cottages in similar condition, most recently 22 Shepherd Street. So there's a lot of great examples to point to, and we would ask the board to deny this request and urge the applicant to undertake rehabilitation efforts in a timely manner. Thank you.
Is there anyone else speaking from the public? All right, Frankie, if you give us city staff comments and recommendations, please.
Okay, that's observation. Current owner purchased in 2023 for tax records. There is a lack of permanent activity on file for this property, which indicates maintenance has not been performed in over a decade. And essentially, we feel like this is a case of demolition by neglect, though as stated by the tax records, not by the current owner. Structure previously received a demo permit in 2011. The staff have been unable to determine what sort of review was done at that time. And while the structure has lost some of its original features, the essential forms still exist, as well as much of the original elements underneath the vinyl siding. This is a significant Charleston building type and should be restored and repaired. So we are recommending denial.
Thank you, Frankie. Mr. Sullivan, did you want to respond to or clarify anything raised in the public comment? or city staff
I'll
comment?
respond quickly, as I said. I mean, I agree, it's a shame that the building is in this shape and what I disagree with is, yes, it's a great form, and I would hope to retain the form. But that's not what this purview is for, it's for historic materials. And there's no foundation, most of the studs are gone or spliced together and have to be repaired. They're sided on two sides, we could save the siding. But it's a zero lot line property and trying to put anything back there is bad, not to mention the tree right there. It's gonna be a danger to the property going forward. And the tree is not on the site, so we don't control that tree. As I said, I wish there was approval that we could say, hey, we'll put something back that looks like this, but that's not. It's not your purview right now, so let's leave it at that.
Thank you. Public comment on the applicant's presentation is now closed. We'll move into board discussion and a vote. And if everyone in the audience, if you need to meet and discuss, if you could head out into the lobby, we can hear you. Okay.
I guess I would just start in just one comment for John. One thing that we do look at is the forms and retention of these forms. And so by the device of our purview, we do have at least some jurisdiction over retention of form by doing that. So, and I believe a recommendation for denial of demolition, we are acknowledging that there's probably a lot of material that's going to have to be reworked or replaced, but the retention of the form is important. One thing I would say about it too, I do think it's especially now hearing a little more of the history of it, it's a valuable structure contextually to that street. Also, in acknowledgement of your statement about, you know, how there's not a lot of foundation left, things like that, and it is close to a pretty large street. I personally would potentially entertain the idea of if there is an effort to, let's say a denial is voted on here, prompting an effort to rehabilitate the building. I would think you might be able to come back and talk about maybe shifting it or something like that, a little further away from that tree. So that's really all I have to.
I think I agree with what Bill has said. You know, our purview, our definition of demolition does include form. And so we do consider that, of course, and I think this building is, you know, this little street where so many of the small structures are being taken care of and preserved. That this is probably an example worth the effort. I also agree with Bill. I was thinking the same thing, that you always want to leave them in situ, but if you want to save the tree and do what's best for the building, shifting this building might not be a bad idea. And I think there's a reasonable amount of material there. Certainly it needs a new foundation, and I'm sure it needs a lot of work on the studs and clearly the roof, but it is, I think, salvageable.
I have nothing to add. I'm in agreement.
make a motion for denial of demolition.
We have a motion on the floor for denial of demolition. Do I have a second to Fillmore's motion?
I'll second that.
You. The motion to a vote, Bill,
Yeah.
Julia,
Yeah, in favor.
Fillmore,
Yeah, in favor.
Laura.
Yeah, in favor.
Chair votes the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Agenda item 268 St. Margaret Street. Frankie, if you give us an introduction overview of the project, please.
Yes, ma'am. 68 St. Margaret is in Wagner Terrace, Council District 6. It is a category 4, circa 1945, 1952. In the historic materials demolition purview. They're requesting a partial demolition of existing structure, which includes a portion of the rear roof. This is the property's location on St. Margaret. Some existing site photos. Context of St. Margaret Street. And sandboard maps showing the history of the structure. And we will turn it over to the applicant.
Hello, I'm Barbara Laney. I'm the architect of record for this application. We are requesting a removal. And can we move to the next slide?
Yep.
If you're looking at that roof plan, that back roof, we're requesting a removal of that. You can see there's a one-story addition off the back that's non-historic. That roof would be removed as well. But I want to point out that if you go to the next slide, on the demo plan, you can see the grayed out portion is what we're asking for the removal of. But note that we're keeping the white band around the sides of that. We're keeping the rake at either side on the gable, the original gable, and we're keeping the eave at the back. And also that the existing ridge will remain as the high point of the mass of the house. So from the front, from St. Margaret Street, the volume does not change other than you're gonna see a little bit of added at the shed, but the original form will still be visible and distinguishable. So on to the next one. Upper right-hand corner is the front elevation. The west or left side is on the top left. The east or right side is on the lower right or lower left. Lower right is the rear elevation. There is some visibility of that asphalt shingle roof between the houses that back up to it on Gordon Street, looking down their driveways. You can see portions of the asphalt shingle roof on either side. And so if we'll go on to the next slide. And to the next one. So in that upper right-hand corner, that's the view in that bolded block, that's the view of the roof from Gordon Street. And that's right around where the church is. For Charleston, it's a little bit of topography, looking up the hill of that driveway and looking at the house. But those are the remaining views around the house as y'all saw today. That's all I had.
Any questions for the applicant? Thank you. Do we have anyone speaking from the public? All right, Frankie, if you give us city staff comments and recommendations, please.
Staff observations, the rake at side gable is being retained. And the proposed demolition is only minimally visible from Gordon Street. Staff recommendation is approval.
Thank you, Frankie. Ms. Looney, did you want to respond to or clarify anything? All right. Public comment on the applicant's presentation is now closed. We'll move into board discussion and a vote.
Just again, if an applicant wants to share what's proposed, they're not allowed to anymore. Is that correct?
That is correct. The applicant's proposal was reviewed and approved by BZA, so there are documents available that they are required to follow. So in that case, I believe you could have looked at those documents for the applicant to talk about.
We
them.
could access them. We can't consider them.
All right, and you know, I ask because although this applicant is credible and I imagine wants to do something perfectly sensible and reasonable, since we're only looking at this demolition, I would be inclined to want to preserve a little bit more of the perimeter of that roof at the back and to maybe preserve a little bit of the north side slope past the ridge, because I mean, since all we can do is imagine the worst case scenario, I can imagine someone just continuing the front roof slope like a giant, ski slope. So I find it difficult to analyze and assess these requests in this way. Not that, I get it, I get all the murkiness, I get it.
I
but,
understand.
Sort of back to that conundrum, if you look at it strictly as demolition, that's probably 40% of the roof.
The whole roof?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably 40% of the whole roof structure being demolished, and so it's it's laid out in a very appropriate way, I think, for what's trying to be accomplished, and I certainly don't have any doubt what's going to happen. But when we say you can tear, virtually all of the back roof off, whatever zoning will approve
Yeah.
can go back.
Just
And so
one.
it puts us in, we're sort of in this
Mhm.
thing. I certainly have reasonable confidence that what was described is what will happen. We're
This
not
is
allowed to
just-
consider it.
This hasn't just come up with this application, but others where we would consider denying it because they could remove the roof and build something much taller. I'm just throwing this out there. As we looked at in the last application, our purview extends over form. So I'm just wondering out loud if a way that we could approve applications like this is to deny any demolition of the roof form, the height. And
That's the needle, yeah, to thread, I've never
yeah,
thought about it. Because, I mean, frankly, the way that the roof plan is shown, there's really no way to preserve those rakes in place. They would just have to be tacked on to whatever's proposed later. So you know what I'm saying?
yeah,
Um,
I was trying to,
I know. I mean,
so that the approval of demolition would still prohibit. It would require the applicant to keep that roof height, but maybe that's not possible.
there might be
Yeah.
some way to do
The
it.
demolition request does go all the way to the ridge.
I know, yeah, that's what I was saying, because of our handicaps, that makes me want to pull that in a little on the side, the ridge, not that I want to disadvantage or mistrust this applicant, it's just, that's objectively, that's my instinct, is to try to prevent someone from building a giant slide to slide down onto St. Margaret Street.
Not that you're considering what goes after.
Correct.
But we have, I feel like we have, and I haven't been at all the meetings, but we have approved ones before, and I appreciate that the application starts, like the starting point includes keeping those rakes and that back eave. And we have taken that before and approved.
It's been smaller portions of the roof, I think, yeah, it's been. You've included some percentages, Frankie, what sort of range of percentages of roof demo have we approved for addition of?
Anywhere from 6 to, I think 40%, maybe 45.
So, well. Again, just looking at the roof plan, nothing would remain of the back of this roof. Because there's nothing to support those rakes once all this gray area is gone. My only idea is to ask for, to step the gray area in a little bit. I don't know, what do you guys think of this?
Maybe hit the second rafter
Like a
off the road.
foot,
And
yeah,
begin to pull it off.
and off
So
the ridge as
the one
well.
thing that, got my attention was the fact that the demolition is going all the way to the
all
ridge.
the way. Mhm.
And, so I think if it were pulled in a little, that would.
Yeah, because I mean, at least that is preservation of
Roof form.
integrity of that roof, regardless of what comes to pass in the remaining hole.
Did you want?
So I'll
Are
try to
you
make
ready
a
to
motion
make a
like that.
motion?
I'll make a motion for approval of partial demolition with a board condition that at the rear slope of the main roof a minimum of 12 inches of roof structure on each side be preserved. And a minimum of 8 inches beyond the ridge be preserved.
So we have a motion on the floor for approval of partial demolition with a board condition that the applicant preserve a minimum of 12 inches of the rear structure on each, excuse me, of the roof structure on each side, and a minimum of 8 inches beyond the ridge.
And that is, I guess that would be not including the rakes, right? So the actual roof structure.
Okay. Can we read it again? Yeah, approval of partial demolition with a board condition that the applicant preserve a minimum of 12 inches of the roof structure at the rear slope of the main roof and a minimum of 8 inches beyond the ridge. Okay, do you have a second to Julia's motion?
I'll second.
Thank you. More. Put the motion to a vote. Laura,
Yay in favor.
Bill,
Yeah, in favor.
Julia,
In favor.
Fillmore.
Yeah, in favor.
Chair votes to the majority and the motion passed unanimously. Thank you. Agenda item 3, 6 Montague Street. Frank, can you give us an introduction to the project, please?
6 Montague Street is in Charleston Village, Council District 8. It is a category 2, circa 1803 in the Goldsboro District. Requesting after the fact approval for alterations to previously approved fence trees. This is the property's location on Montague. Existing site. That's some context of Montague. And more maps showing the history of the property. And some photos from the BAR inspection. And I will turn it over to the applicant.
Hey, thank you all for your time tonight. This is, the Switzer House. It was built in 1803. It's a fascinating structure, double timber frame. So the outboard wall holds siding, and the inboard wall that is 1 foot inboard holds the plaster. He was a saddle maker on King Street. He sold his saddle on King Street. And we did find a horseshoe. So that's hopefully a little bit of fun. Let's see, do I have a pointer or do I say next slide?
Next slide,
Okay, great.
misplaced the pointer.
Thank you. So the lower portion, the lower drawing is the as-built, and the upper drawing was the approved condition. So that window that was part of the Colby package was moved from the first floor to the second floor. That's sort of the straight on elevation view drawing that we're talking about here. The 1803 house, the Switzer house, is in the front, and the 1960s edition, you can see where that begins towards the back house part of the house, and then we added the screen porch and that small hyphen, extending the footprint 2 feet 4 inches. Next slide, please. One of the things we were able to do is keep all the mechanical equipment out of the historic house and out of the rooms that we sort of needed to put, bedrooms and things in the back of the house. That allowed us to minimize the footprint of the house on the lot. This is a lot that is zoned for 2 buildings. We put in a beautiful garden. So we were doing everything that we could to keep the footprint of modern mechanical, et cetera, in a limited portion of the building. This is that window that is pictured in the view. This is about 15 feet right of the side of the house, looking down this alley. Next slide, please. I had an intern this summer. One of her jobs was to go out and take a walk down Montague Street and time it. She walks too fast. 2 minutes, she did that in 460 feet. I think that's 3.5 for me. The next slide. This is the approximate 20-foot section that you see the window in at an oblique angle, 75 feet back from the sidewalk. Approximately 11 steps. Okay, the next one. Please. So this is the sequential photos we took from our phone. You can tell it was humid. On the upper left, there's the first image that you see where the window is barely visible. The next one is barely visible there by the downspout. It's just inboard of that copper downspout. Third image is pretty similar. Fourth is sort of where you start to lose it. And then the 5th image on the lower left, similarly, it's very difficult to see. And then you get that magnolia tree and you really can't see it, not because of the tree, just because of the angle. And the next slide, please. This is from across the street. So the width, just because of sight lines, is approximately 30 feet instead that you can see this thing. About 15 steps, but now it is 120 feet from where you're standing, and it is again oblique to you, and 50 feet back on the building. Sorry, 30 feet back on the building. Next step, please. Next slide. And these are those images from the opposite side, not too different. Or the opposite way on the street. The next slide, please. This is a letter of support from the neighbor who is here tonight to speak also. She lived next, I'll let her say these things, but she lived next to 6 sort of college apartments for a long, I think for a while. She may have came into the house, but that's what it was, and it's become a single family residence. Again, I'll let her speak to this. Next slide, please. This is a survey just to sort of show that those dimensions. But interestingly, there was a surveyor that bought the house in the 60s, and he's the one that split it up into apartments, and he also added this addition where this window is located in order to get these sort of bedrooms crammed in there. The thing that he did, he kept the front rooms just perfectly preserved, all the woodwork. There's a lot of coats of paint, but no alterations, which is just incredible, and my client was able to preserve those as well. So Albert Simmons, he had him in there to write a little description of it, which allowed us to figure out that there was a window at the top of the attic that looked out on the street that we could never see from the VARs from the early images. The next slide, please. So this is, just that dimensional 72 feet from the sidewalk. And the next slide, please. We had a kitchen designer. This was part of the interior design show house for the Charleston Symphony Orchestra. It raised over $100,000 for them, which was great. Every designer gets a room. The kitchen designer came in and altered the kitchen a bit from what we have. And the range moved over, and the operable window was no longer a good place for it. Next slide, please. So this is the location that it went into. Similarly, another separate designer reworked the bathroom on the 9 designers. I think there were 9 designers, maybe 11. reworked the interior closet, and that's where the window is in the circle area. Next slide, please. And then this is the mechanical equipment that's squeezed in that little section. We hired a mechanical engineer because we were trying to do a lot in a little space and keep it happy in 100-degree weather, which we accomplished. Next slide, please. And then these are the hot water heaters, which are in the same location they used to be in. There are now 3 instead of the 6 that were there. And yeah, that is there one more slide? So that's the building that sat on the market for a little bit on the left-hand side in 2021, I think. And I probably all rode by it a lot of times and just kind of wondered, like, what's up with that building? It doesn't quite look right. And so the owner restored it beautifully, and that's the picture on the right. So we feel that this window is in a minimally visible part of the structure, which is not historic, and we would respectfully request that you approve the relocation of this window.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
Maybe if you don't mind, just like a quick rundown of the timeline from your perspective, like how the decision was made and what happened and how we're here.
Sure. So the entire construction of this project happened within the course of 2 months, aside from, I'm sorry, felt like 2 months, 12 months, which was a lot. This was a very fast-paced project. The owner had a contributing contractor. There was a contractor on site. The contributing contractor, at the suggestion of this board, which was a good one, removed every piece of the wood on the 1960s addition because some of it had been relocated from the north side in a smart way, sanded it, and then put it back up. So there are 2 contractors, 9 designers, me, and the owner was incredibly involved. He lives across the street. He's been there 40 years, 45 years. So that when did this happen? Probably mid kitchen design. Yeah. Which is, sort of 9 months into 12.
And then it came up during the.
It came up during the inspection, and this is, I mean, you all know, this is a Colby package of windows. It takes 20 to 24, turns out to be 26 weeks to get here, and it's installed late in a rush.
Any other questions?
So the window is the same window that was approved, it's just in a different location.
That's correct. And we do feel that the sort of rhythm and the proportion of the window locations is complementary to the historic building. And that, is diminutive to the other windows, skinnier part of
Any other questions? Thank you. Is there anyone speaking from the public?
Hey.
So continue.
Go ahead.
We, Simmons, in your package, did we have a photograph of the original edition and the fenestration of the original edition?
We don't have that.
Okay, I thought I saw it. The edition, 1960 edition, which was done with no particular sensitivity to the historic elements, had windows on this side. I believe it had a window in this exact location. The windows were store-bought, 6/6, small, but were no relation to the historic windows. In our design, we configured the window that wound up in this discussion to be extremely sympathetic to the existing 2/2 historic windows. The two historic windows are exceptionally tall, exceptionally grand, and very beautiful. The window we added, which was custom ordered, it didn't take 26 weeks, it took 36 weeks, and was extraordinarily expensive, but it was configured to be an appropriate match, or at least sympathetic to the historic windows. They only did that same window is the window under discussion. It was moved from what we call the first floor, or piano nobile, to the second floor to accommodate mechanical equipment, kitchen operations, gas, hot water heaters, etc. But it also is sympathetic to the windows on the upper floor, which are identical to the windows on the first floor. It is the approved window, just in a slightly different location. There is a slight offset between the sill height of the two historic windows and the new, more modern window, which was mandated by the configuration of the addition, which was different than the original building. We did everything we could to make the two fit. They fit together quite beautifully, but that explains why there's a small, and it's a matter of inches really, difference in sill heights, which I think is one of the concerns. It not only is it marginally visible, when you can see it, it's very beautiful. That we are intensely proud of the work we did to preserve the old fabric, but by the way, at the suggestion of this board that was interested, even though the old fabric was deteriorated, even though it was not historic, it had been there a long time, and it had a certain vibration that I agree was worth saving. We did. Every single board was taken down and painstakingly rehabilitated and put back up. The installation of this window is, in my opinion, exquisite. It would be a terrible shame to modify something that's so beautiful. My neighbor lives across the street, looks right at it, and your letter is in your package. She not only has no objection, like everybody else in Charleston Village, she is thrilled with the restoration of this house. I respectfully ask that you approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you. And did you all have any questions? Okay. Is there anyone speaking from the public? All right, Frankie, to give the city staff comments and recommendations, please.
We did a final BR inspection on May 15th, which is when staff noted the discrepancy from the approved plans. And at that time, the options that staff provided were to either move the window to the approved location on the second floor, or replace the window with a smaller window, which would match the approved drawing of the west elevation, with the window cells aligned, windows on the front of the front portion of the house, or that they could approve or return to the board for after the fact approval. Since this is a category 2, staff was unable to approve the location change at staff. And since it's based on a previous board approval, staff recommendation has to be denial.
Thank you, Frankie.
After the fact.
Did you want to respond to or clarify anything raised in the city staff comments?
Yes,
And I think
what are
just
the options?
Yeah, I just think as a rule, just note that the city, I think with all after the fact, you automatically recommend
Yes.
denial.
Yes.
I understand. One of the options is B, replace with a smaller window. If that's an acceptable solution, it would be a gross diminution in the aesthetic appeal of this facade. And it would return to a inappropriately sized window that was there for 60 or 70 years. So I think if the option is a smaller window is better than a bigger window, It's essentially accepting the appropriateness of a window, just asking that it be smaller. That is extraordinarily, I mean, you're talking thousands of dollars, but it's also, to me, a diminution in the aesthetics substantially. I understand the staff cannot approve this without board review, and that's why we're here. But this, if you came to look at this, and I hope, by the way, you all will, this is an award-winning restoration in which no expense was spared, not just monetary, but emotional, design, and chemistry. It was intended to be built as a tribute to my wife, who sadly was confined to a nursing home before it was finished. But this was a labor of intense commitment by me and by everybody who worked on it. And what you would see if you went there is exquisitely beautiful.
Thank you. All right, public comment and the applicant's presentation is now closed. We'll move into board discussion and a vote.
Real quick, Frankie, should your comment one A say first floor?
She was.
We were thinking, it
The
is
ground
the
floor would be the
ground.
Oh, you, okay, so you're count, okay.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Not doing.
sorry.
beyond another.
Yeah.
You know, it's possible I missed on review if this came from more than one, but I don't recall this particular window or that particular piece of the eastern facade being
Controversial.
controversial at all. So, I mean, I
Well,
really don't have a,
to you, clarify
Mhm.
if that would help.
yeah.
The staff recommendation. Our recommendation was based on the approved drawing. So our option was that either the window could be where the board approved for it to be, or it could match the size and placement of the window on the west elevation. Since that was sort of a position and size that the board had approved, we felt that we could do that at staff. Because on the west elevation, it is a smaller window where the windowsill matches the front portion of the house. So we were mimicking that in a part, trying to provide option.
I mean, and I understand that you guys have to make those judgment calls and about your purview and every individual case, but with this being on a relatively non-historic part of the structure, I can't imagine there would have been any controversy. You know, I think there's little, small changes come about in every single project, and in my personal estimation, this is one of those small changes that doesn't really alter the design in any substantial way, and I really don't have an issue with it.
I don't really have, I agree, Julia, I would say hopefully somebody gives that interior designer a pretty stern talking to, coming and moving things around that are approved. Hopefully that would be an end result of all of this, whoever that was. But yeah, I agree. I'm just looking at the context of these two elevations right here, and if you had presented this one versus that one, that would have been probably a point. I was more busy looking at probably the addition and the other things like that. And by fact that the cornice of the addition is lower, probably mandated by us. The window height in relation doesn't really bother me either. So yeah, I don't really have an issue with it. I just have a little issue with the overbearing interior design.
Neither.
I'm hoping so much you can make a phone call, find out who that was and make a phone call. I hope they don't go around the city practicing like that. But anyway, yeah, I think I don't really have an issue with it.
It's true, it is their fault you're here, I guess you could say.
Yeah,
They did a wonderful job.
yeah, I appreciate that. It's very judicial.
I agree with Bill's assessment that if these two configurations that come before us, it would be a coin toss. I mean, there's nothing inappropriate about it. I think about any one of them. In these circumstances, but I always struggle with this. That's why I don't you just ask permission. instead of just. That's why we have the process and the rules. And it's particularly important for 2 houses, but it is certainly important for all the rest. And so every time you get in a situation like this, it's that, the simple thing to do, and I know because I've done it over and over and over again, is just to ask permission. Instead of just doing it and assuming that either no one will notice or they'll ask forgiveness instead of permission. So I still struggle with that a little bit, even though honestly, there's nothing wrong with architecture. What's been presented.
Very good point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for all the effort you put into the house. I know it was a
Yes,
lot of effort.
I mean, it's a
got
lovely
the-
project and
That's the first house when I got to Charleston and started working, I lived in was number 2 Montague. Probably about the time you were there early on in mid-80s. And I remember that party house. Noises and yeah. So thank you. Thank you.
We have some consensus.
I will make a motion for approval of these alterations with the board condition to always have permission in the future before you change them.
Is that a real board?
No.
I think it's important. It's gold.
it's not a matter of scope. It's just a matter of we have a process in place and there is a really good reason for it.
Yeah.
We all know it.
It's true. There are
And
scores, hundreds of other violations that I would love for you to catch, and that are not interchangeable with what was approved and yeah. So in theory, yes, thank you staff for being vigilant.
All right, we have a motion on the floor for approval of fact alterations. Do I have a second?
Second.
Bill, the motion to vote. Laura?
Yeah.
Fillmore?
Yeah, in favor.
Julia?
Yeah, in favor.
Bill?
Yeah.
Chair votes the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you all. Thank you. Agenda item 482 Columbus Street. Frank, you could give us some introduction and overview of the project, please.
82 Columbus Street is in East Side, Council District 4. It is not surveyed circa 1991 in the Old City District. Requesting conceptual approval for alterations to existing exterior stair. This is the location on Columbus Street. Some existing site photos. Context of Columbus. And Sanborn map showing the previous structure. And I will turn it over to the applicant.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nicholas Ranko and I'm representing the homeowner. I am with Duke Commercial Construction. We also do residential, but today I'm just requesting your approval for the deleting the existing staircase to the front of the house, which is on Columbus. This house sits on Columbus and America. Hanover. Please. I know this isn't required, but this is kind of just my synopsis on the property. The house was constructed in the early 90s. It's a 2-story. I believe it's zoned commercial use. One more, please. Okay. So currently it is sitting behind that screening right there, which we're going to leave in place. And we are just looking for access to the second floor. We're utilizing this side entrance as a dual purpose. So you can have access to the first floor. And then if you kind of dogleg right up, which is on the prints, you'd have dedicated access to the second floor.
Let me know when you want me to
Yes,
stop.
thank you. Right there. Next, the one previous, please. Thank you. And you can see right there, on our demo plan, the hatched out upper left is existing staircase, excuse me. And then on the right-hand side, we have our proposed staircase. And we would be adding a door to the second floor. We'll try to match the existing finishes and profiles. And I believe that's all I have.
Any questions for the applicant?
So the goal is to be able to access the first floor as commercial and the upper separately as residential, right? Just to, okay, segregate the two.
It would be, so I currently have a hair salon downstairs. The upstairs right now, I would like a separate entrance so that people are not coming in and out of my business. So it would be, I could then lease it out to another business. There's an attorney currently across the street from me. The street has really come along with a lot of businesses. And so I would like to have another professional person in the building upstairs from me. So no one will be living there. It would be rented to someone professional so that otherwise half the house is sitting empty. It doesn't make sense to have a commercial building that half of it is sitting empty. And there's just not enough. I just need another entrance so they can have their own come and go without coming through my space every day and interrupting my business.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, we do have neighbor support as well. We got it in after I submitted our submittal. We did have some support from the across the street neighbor as well.
Any other questions?
So there is a first floor door that's being removed, or is it tucked up under that stair?
What was that, sir?
There's a first floor door
Yes, sir.
under the stair. Is it staying?
No, just currently.
Am I reading that wrong? I'm looking at the
Yes,
picture. I'm looking at the picture.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Which door? I don't know which door.
If you go back to the photos,
The one that's just around the corner right there. Right?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
that's a little storage shed that's staying.
okay,
Yep. That was the existing storage part of the house. So that's not gonna be,
so that's tucked up under the stair is proposed.
and that'll stay, yeah.
So is one of these proposed louvered, is it open to go into that space or?
The staircase will come into above that and attach to the staircase that's existing
Right,
and then
but
come into the landing.
do you go in through one of those to get into that storage?
Yes, sir. I'll hinge up a door. I'll rough in a door and hinge it up so that they can have access to that area.
And then we're taking away one window where the new stair goes.
That's correct, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
I didn't think it was great to have a window directly on a staircase for potential break-ins. So that would be the reasoning on that. I mean, I could also cover it up, but I think cosmetically it looks better to not do something that doesn't match the rest of the building. It's a 1990s house, so it's not historical, but it's trying to make it look, everyone thinks it's historical visually. It looks on the street.
Any other questions? Thank you all.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone speaking from the public? All right, Frank.
Staff just had some observations. The provided drawings show some porch infill, but that's not noted as part of the application, so we were assuming that that's not part of this. And that we had a condition that the drawing should not show that is being reviewed because that would also require board approval. Staff recommendation is conceptual approval for alteration to existing exterior stair with staff condition and final review by staff.
Thank you, Frankie. Did you all want to clarify or respond to anything in the city staff comments? And you don't have to. They gave you a good recommendation, but you have the opportunity to respond if you would like, before we move into board discussion. Okay. All right, public comment in the applicant's presentation is now closed. We'll move into board discussion and a vote.
You could definitely, as you described, would enhance functionality in the building, which is a good thing. I guess the only thing I would ask is that you have your architect, properly render the enclosure under the stair and how you're gonna, it just looks like fixed louvers now. If you can render, whatever door apparatus you're coming up with when you submit to staff for the final sign off. And I forgot to add, but you're matching the pickets and all the details of that existing little stair, right? With your remaining. Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's perfectly reasonable, clever way to make better use of this building. And admittedly, I did not stare at the photos of the existing, but I hope that with your new stair, you'll have solid treads and not deck boards, and the tiny little detail for the railing isn't great. And then there are window details that I think are just not relevant. So when you clean all that up.
Julia, were you going to make a motion?
Yes. Yes, conceptual approval with final review by staff, and I think staff's condition number 1. The only condition.
All right, we have a motion on the floor for conceptual approval with final review conceptual approval with staff condition 1. Oh, it's all staff conditions. And final review by staff. Do I have a second to Julie's motion?
So,
Laura, give it.
Laura, go ahead.
All right, put the motion to a vote. Fillmore,
Yeah, in favor.
Bill,
Yeah.
Julia,
In favor.
Laura. Yeah. Chair vote to the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you all.
And we can do that final review in the amendment, so you'll just need the drawings corrected for staff to approve.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
The fifth and final agenda item, 215 Wentworth Street. Frankie, you'll give us an introduction overview of the project, please.
215 Wentworth is in Charleston Village, Council District 8. It is not surveyed circa 1997 in the Old Historic District, requesting conceptual approval for a second floor enclosed addition over existing porch and fenestration operations. This is the property's location on Wentworth Street. Existing site photos. Context of Wentworth Street. And I will turn it over to the applicant.
Thank you, Frankie. I'm Bill Marshall with Architrave. I'm also the owner's Bill and Mary Beth Witchley are also here. Thought I'd start and then see if they want to have anything to add in the presentation. I wholeheartedly agree with Rogue Interior Designers from the previous submittal. Got my own it's an interesting project. If you go back, you don't have to, but Frankie, but if you go back to the existing building that's there, it's where you can. It's sort of a sort of single house 1997 interpretation as a part of this overall development. If you notice, the first thing, the roof is a hipped roof, and then there's a shed roof within the hipped roof. So there's really not any sense of kind of vertical presence for the house, which I think is one thing that makes it stand out different from the other houses in this context. The one elevation that sort of tells a little bit more of the chaotic nature of the existing house is the right side elevation. Windows and doors do not align. Column base spacings are different from one another. And the big idea here is that in the existing floor plan, the stair that accesses the second floor comes up the back of the house and enters really into a bathroom. We have to walk through a bathroom to get to other bedrooms. And so there's a functionality aspect to the request. So what we're hopeful to do is to request permission to pull the bedrooms out over the existing one-story porch and create some vertical alignment with columns and windows and doors of that elevation that is a little bit more visible than the rest of the houses on the street because of the drive access to the houses that front on Lockwood. As a part of that, we're adding a small third floor level that would access a roof deck above that porch, which is why we're showing a wall there rather than an open rail or a roof. There are, I think they're probably in your packet, but there are 7 letters from the neighborhood, 6 from the neighborhood owners and 1 from the secretary of the regime that actually manages this property, all in favor of the request. With regard to the fenestration, so some of it is the vertical alignment of trying to create some order to that elevation. The other is that the first floor windows are a different style than the second floor windows, so we're trying to unify those back to, would make a little bit more logical sense. Anything else that y'all?
Sum that up pretty good.
Okay,
Yeah.
Happy to answer any questions. I recognize it's compared to a lot of things y'all been looking at, it's more of a complex organism for sure.
Any questions for the applicant?
How much higher is the plate height? I'll just say you're proposing gables versus hip on the front. How much higher is the plate height you're proposing?
I put my glasses on. Existing to proposed,
Yeah,
there's a short knee wall. There's probably a section in there, Frankie, that shows it where that gable comes up. There it is. 2 foot 4 inches, 2 foot 6 inches. Oh, we actually did receive approval from BZA for a special exception since the existing porch and part of the house was actually over that side setback.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Marshall.
Sure, absolutely.
Do we have anyone speaking?
Anna Catherine Alexander with the Preservation Society of Charleston. We would like to thank the applicant for meeting with us to discuss this project earlier this year. While we understand this building is not historic, it does have a height, scale, and massing that's largely in keeping with the character of the historic district. The age of the structure does allow room for flexibility to explore creative design solutions, but as proposed, the approach to gaining additional square footage is aggressive and needs to be scaled back. In particular, the alterations to the roof form and the series of side additions and dormers result in a design that is complicated, top-heavy, and out of scale with the streetscape and the surrounding context. We feel that this design needs further study before it can move forward. Thank you.
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation. ACF has reviewed the application for conceptual approval for the project, and we thank the applicant for reaching out with us on the project a few months ago and for the modifications to the drawings since that meeting. While we do appreciate the fact that this house dates to 1997, the Charleston Place neighborhood was designed to fit into the context of the historic district. The proposed modifications are large for the scale of the houses within the Charleston Place neighborhood and that are along Wentworth Street. We respectfully recommend deferral of this application and encourage the applicant to study reducing the massing of the addition. Thank you.
Frankie, if you'll give us city staff comments and recommendations.
Okay, staff just had a couple observations. That the expansion of the gable roof form substantially alters I think that's supposed to say form of the house, sorry. And the proposal alters the height scale and mass of the existing structure. In addition, contradicts typical development patterns by having infill above an open porch. A staff recommendation is denial for height, scale, mass.
Thank you, Frankie. Mr. Marshall, did you want to respond to or clarify anything raised in the public comment or the city staff comments and recommendations?
Yeah, I'm a little bit disappointed with staff's bluntness in their reply. I actually reached out to Frankie a couple of times by phone and email, came down here with drawings 50 days ago, and I recognize the staff's really busy. I haven't really heard a reply from that after trying to make numerous efforts to come down here. So
I will say I was under the impression that my boss was responding to you. So if that did not happen, I do apologize because I thought that.
not one response from anybody. So that I think if I had known that was happening, I would have tried to address something before. Met with the nice ladies here back in January, and at that time we were not changing the very front room of the house roof, and it really looked like, to us and to me, it looked like somebody stepped on it. So I think that the introduction of the gable there was actually helpful versus the existing structure that is part hip, part shed, and very flat compared to other houses in the neighborhood. So I felt by raising that gable up at the street, it actually made it more sympathetic to the neighboring houses around.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall.
Sure.
All right, public comment and the applicant's presentation is now closed. We'll move into board discussion and a vote. Well, before we start, did you want to respond as well as the homeowner?
I did. I just wanted to make a couple of comments. First of all, I appreciate you guys very much for what you do. I'm a Charlestonian. I grew up here. I actually went to Miss Mason's, which is a block over from where we live, which is crazy because now it's called Mason Prep. They didn't even have like 7th, 8th grade back when I graduated. So I've been here a long time. Anyways, I appreciate you guys very much. We went through everybody, talked to everyone in town that we needed to, and I understand not everything's a perfect process. We actually made changes to what we originally did in order to satisfy the groups here that just spoke against us. And I feel like when you turn the corner onto Wentworth, our house is an ugly house.
It is.
It is a freaking ugly. But hello, I mean, the state just changed Lockwood where you're forced to either turn on to Montague, Wentworth, or the Fame. And one of our houses, our house is one of the first houses you see as you turn the corner. And we're trying to do something to make it nicer, look better, and function better because as Bill pointed out, you go up the staircase in order to get to the other bedrooms, you have to walk through a bathroom to get to it. And the only way for us to fix that is to push it out over the existing area. Now, maybe we can scale the roof down and change stuff, and we're gonna come back because we're gonna make some changes. But I just want you to know that we're not trying to go outside of the envelope of what Charleston is. I mean, I grew up here, I love this place. And I thank you for your time, but we'd really like to make this work out so it's actually a functioning house that looks great when you turn the corner onto Wentworth. And I feel like what we've done actually looks great. Thank you very much for your time. Just wanted to say that.
Thank you. I take a left on View Fame because of your house. So can't look at it. Okay, now public comment in the applicant's presentation is closed. We'll move into board discussion.
One thing, and this is just like housekeeping thing, but when we review these things, it's so helpful to have existing and proposed elevations, existing and proposed plans juxtaposed on one page. So but I'm trying to go back and forth between multiple files that I've got open. I mean, personally, I agree that the house could use improvement, and I actually think that the way it's heading makes some sense to me. Maybe it's just a little toning down of the knee wall, especially at the front. So it seems unusually stretched at the front. the distance between the windows on the second floor and that one up in the attic is really kind of exaggerated, but I appreciate what they're trying to do, and I personally think they're on a pretty logical path.
Yeah, and I think there's obviously room for improvement, as you would say. I do agree. Yeah, it's the first striking thing is really the verticality of the proposal. Was looking at the forward gable, and obviously that is a lot thinner than the secondary gable. And I was looking at the proportions of the secondary gable, sort of filling in the blanks here in my head, and I was thinking, well, that is almost pushing it to the sort of rocket house type thing, but the smaller gable that's forward is really pushing it into those proportions. And to the same point Julia made about the distance between the windows and things like that, just sort of overemphasizes that. So, I mean, I think there's a creative solution somewhere that definitely could be had. I think you've already acknowledged that the, opportunity to fix some things that are problematic is there. And I don't think you're headed in the wrong direction. I just think that the proportions of what we're seeing I'd say it's both a massing, I guess, to whatever degree, and then a height standpoint. Just kind of just a little too vertical. It's sort of getting, again, sort of rockety, for lack of a better word. I think that's actually a word somewhere in the ordinance, somewhere about rocket houses or rocket houses.
Is it in the, I thought.
I don't know if they officially put it in there.
I just like to talk about.
So, that would be a major point. And then I would say too, regarding the sort of potential, call it infill area over porch, I can see there's an area where that could work, but I would say, in my mind, again, this is just me personally, but I think the sort of handling of everything is really sort of, I don't know, it's really sort of overemphasizing it to me. In my mind, I think that could be sort of toned down.
I agree with what I think's been said already, and certainly I think there's room for improvement. I find the added enclosure over the porch, for one thing, that generally is something that doesn't fit generally the character of Charleston houses, to stack an enclosure on top of an open porch. So that bothers me, but I'm not saying that there's not a way to accomplish that. I think what's done here is appears very top heavy and massive above the open section of the porch. And so I think that needs, I'm not, I think there may be a way to address that, but that needs some help. And I agree with the other statements that have been made. So I think it's not there yet. So, and I do think it's drawn to my eye, the cables at one end hit the other are a little odd, but that probably reads more odd in drone elevation than in real life. So.
And that is the weirdest second floor plan I've seen in a long time, your existing second floor plan.
Yeah.
It's not apartment to live in.
That was the genesis of trying to figure out how to, I don't speak out of turn, but that was sort of the genesis of what can we do? Shy of a bulldozer. And
It being built in 97, I feel like you see weird floor plans when we're trying to make it fit within some old house, but
70s.
no, someone.
Well, so. Hang on.
I think we need to give some clear direction. I've heard a lot of it needs to be fixed, but maybe to give them some clear direction on what would be, if it's a deferral or a denial, what would be approved?
I'm not find it's a deferral or restudy of some things. Did the applicant have a quick question or something?
I was gonna maybe offer a summary from what I hear, if that's helpful.
We'll figure it out eventually.
I'll be quiet.
So. Try to make a motion for deferral or restudy of. Exaggerated verticality. Restudy / mitigation of exaggerated verticality. And.
Mass
So,
of
yeah.
the porch itself, or.
The
addition,
massing
not
and-
infill, actually, the massing of the
the
porch.
height,
Second.
scale.
Is it massing and simplification of the?
Massing and simplification of the porch. Alterations. Is that it?
I think your verticality comment covers a lot.
Yeah.
Anything else to this collective board motion being made by Julia?
Can you read it back for us?
Yes. So we have a motion on the floor for deferral for restudy and mitigation of the exaggerated verticality. And restudy
And simplification.
restudy and simplification on the massing of the porch alterations.
Or you just take what? Restudy and simplification of the porch. Alterations.
Okay, I'm gonna read that again. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor for deferral for restudy and mitigation of the exaggerated verticality and restudy and simplification of the porch alterations. Do I have a second to Julia's motion?
I'll second that.
Laura, the motion to a vote. Fillmore,
Yeah, in favor.
Bill,
Yeah.
Julia,
In favor.
Laura.
Yay, in favor.
Chair vote to the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Now, I want to make sure you walk away with clear direction.
Sure.
Did that make sense?
Yeah, I think what I heard, recognize the verticality issues. I think it's, so we looked at different ways to skin that upper level porch enclosure, including more glass or siding or the panel. I think now, the panel is not gonna happen. I think having the doing something other than the panel will actually help with losing those vertical lines. I think would be helpful. What I'm hearing, I think, which is very helpful, is with the deferral, you're not opposed to the idea of having an infilled section to help us create our floor plan issues on the inside. That's sort of what I hear, which I think is very positive.
I would say that, I would say take a, I know that upper level deck is a amenity. But obviously if that wasn't there, it would sure simplify that massing as well.
It's just,
Something to think about.
don't disagree. There are a few others in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
And so it wouldn't be the first one, but I think that panel rail also adds to the work.
Probably a pretty
Thank
nice view up there, right?
Sorry.
Probably a pretty nice view from up there, admittedly. Right,
Do I have a
are you
motion
done?
to adjourn?
Yeah.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed? Motion passes. Thank you all.
I'm sorry, someone, they go that.